What does the church believe? The church believes that which was taught everywhere, at all times, by all. Peter didn't preach a different gospel than Paul, or John, or James, or Thaddeus, or Simon the Zealot, or Thomas. And for the next 1,000 years, the church never had a difference of belief in any doctrine or dogma or, well, just in it regularly, just basic belief. They all believed the same thing, whether it was the churches in India, Ethiopia, Ireland, Greece, North Africa, Italy, Palestine, Egypt. That's why it confuses me. In the New Testament, there's a structure laid out, right? The church existed, then it started writing these things, the epistles, these bios, which we called Gospels according to. Some of them were used for a while and then dropped, and the canon was eventually formed, or a few different ones, but the Old Testament was agreed upon. It was the Septuagint, or what was in the Septuagint. But now, well, since the first Protestant movement, which is papal, the papal church, the Bishop of Rome, who calls himself the Pope, who started using, instead of going by what was revealed, not adding or taking away, but using man-made theories and logics and understandings and all this stuff, came up with a lot of different weird stuff and tried to declare himself higher than every other bishop in the world. And Rome broke away from every other see, from Antioch, from Jerusalem, from Constantinople, from Alexandria. And then you had three breakaways a few hundred years later: Calvin, Luther, and Henry VIII. And it wasn't until a compromise with the Quakers that the books that had always been part of the Christian Old Testament were taken out, because they didn't already agree with what the people decided upon would be the belief of the church. Now you can go to any church, these Bible-based churches, which again is hilarious. How the hell could you have a Bible-based church? That doesn't make any sense. The Bible is based on the church. It came hundreds of years later. It was written, edited, and compiled. You'd have to trust the church for the first 500 years. Actually, until after King James, you'd have to trust it for the Quaker Compromise. So you'd have to trust like four different churches, four different claimants to the church. And then, I mean, go to any non-denominational Bible-based church, and their doctrines and beliefs will be different. But usually the Trinity and the hypostatic union are never taught. It seems very arrogant to me that people nowadays think that they know better and they can interpret Scripture than those who knew John or knew Peter and Paul or were taught by the Apostle John or were taught by the guy who was taught by the Apostle John. People who were martyred because they wouldn't give up their faith in Christianity. People who still knew. People who knew some of the 70 that had followed Christ. People who knew the gospel writers. Yet their commentaries and what they say, doesn't matter. That our modern day, how we interpret it, a 2,000-year-old compilation of different books, is superior to the earliest church that was undivided and that wasn't just ethereal. It had structure. Bishops, presbyters, deacons. Peace to you. That's just something. If somebody can explain that to me, I'd love to hear it. Why? It just confuses me.